Premier League players from all 20 clubs will continue to take the knee during the upcoming season to highlight their opposition to racism. Players have said in a statement, "We feel now more than ever it is important for us to continue to take the knee as a symbol of our unity against all forms of racism." To discuss this, I'm joined now by Tony Burnett, who is the Chief Executive of Kick It Out, and journalist Aaron Fenton-Hewitt. Good evening to you both, and thanks for joining us. Tony, this taking the knee gesture has been somewhat divisive, hasn't it? We've had people like Gareth Southgate coming on, telling everyone to writing letters, saying to support the gesture, but still it does seem somewhat divisive. How do you think it will be received now that the games will be played in much busier stadiums?
I think that for me, it's not been divisive. I'll be absolutely honest with you. I think the stance that Gareth and the England players took was absolutely fantastic over the course of the Euros, and I think that was really responsible for swaying a lot of people who didn't really understand the issues. I think a lot of people who tend to follow the England team would not necessarily follow football on a weekly basis, and with what happened in the final, I think a lot of people got a really good introduction to the lived experience of racism for some of our footballers. So I think the gesture actually now is supported by the vast majority of people. For the few people that do decide now to still boo, whether they disagree with it or not, the few people that decide to still boo, this isn't about education. The players have been very clear that there's no political motive to this. I saw some of the interviews with James Tavernier over the weekend, and I think that as a Scottish professional player, he was incredibly articulate about this isn't political. They are following no particular political movement. They are against discrimination and against racism. That's the message. Those who choose not to buy into that are doing it for their own reasons. It's not because they don't understand the rationale or because they don't necessarily agree with taking the knee. For me, it's something completely different.
What is it then?
I don't think whatever gesture people chose to use to fight racism, there's a group of people that would never be for that. Let's be absolutely honest. I'm not going to label those people, but those people, I think.
Label them. I mean, you're making quite a statement there. So, what is it that you feel?
Well, there's two aspects to this, and I heard your recent discussion on obviously 10 years on since the riots. I've got a bit of a background in working for policing organisations as well. That's a really good example of what happened during those riots and what's happened since. But last week there was an all-party MP's report talking about how things haven't improved enough when it comes to the police's treatment of and how they work with black communities. That is symptomatic of the issue that we've got as a nation. The discrimination is still real. It's happening in policing, in the criminal justice system. It's happening in football. It's happening in all walks of life. For some people, that's a really difficult narrative to absorb. What gesture you choose to oppose that is irrelevant for me, because we're getting sidetracked from the issue, the clear issue is discrimination is alive and well, and race discrimination is very much alive and well in Britain, and we have to be honest with that and really start to tackle it. The gesture is a side issue.
Aaron, the gesture of taking the knee is a side issue, and it's reflective of the fact that there's still racial discrimination in this country. Surely that's a fair point Tony's making there?
Well, I mean, if it's not a political issue, then why use a political gesture to label it? The truth of the matter is, many people believe Black Lives Matter is fundamentally a divisive movement. We see some of the scenes last year during the Black Lives Matter protests in central London, where they were spewing anti-police rhetoric, tearing down statues, burning the Union Jack, and so many people link Black Lives Matter, the symbol of gesture of kneeling, to those things, which is fundamentally lawlessness. So it's not really surprising as to why people would boo Black Lives Matter, in the same way they would cheer for objectively anti-racist movements such as Kick It Out, for example. It makes no sense to me why people are so surprised by this.
Tony?
I mean, look, Aaron, I think I completely disagree. So I think there's a real issue here. So firstly, you've mentioned Black Lives Matter. I've not heard a single player talk about the Black Lives Matter movement when they talk about taking the knee. So why we choose to associate a gesture that players choose to adopt around anti-discrimination, and people like you are, unfortunately, decide to link that to BLM. It's not the players doing that. That's you. And I didn't hear this debate for many other similar discussions prior to the players deciding to take the knee. When Colin Kaepernick did this, there was no discussion around BLM. And actually, when Colin Kaepernick did this, it was a watered-down version of the protest that he wanted to do, that he was advised to do by a white colleague. So this isn't about BLM. Let's stop this nonsense about associating with BLM. This is people saying racism is alive and well in Britain. Our sports people standing up and saying this has to stop. Forget the gesture. Let's look at the facts. Racism is alive and well. We have to stop it. And we have to stop talking about side issues and get on with the job of tackling racism.
Aaron?
Well, the reason why I mentioned Black Lives Matter specifically is because the Premier League itself actually supported the movement. If you remember back in the 1920 season, after the restart, most Premier League clubs, including Arsenal, that I support obviously, Crystal Palace and other clubs, actually had Black Lives Matter on their shirts if it wasn't the whole league. So it's a bit far-reaching to say that there's no link between the kneeling and Black Lives Matter. There's a clear link, and there's no getting around it. And unfortunately, mud sticks. People will link the violence that comes with some people who support Black Lives Matter and link it to what they actually stand for. They've been accused of doing things like, trying to dismantle the nuclear family and dismantling capitalism. And fundamentally, many people believe that particular movement, not the idea of racism in itself, but that particular movement as fundamentally divisive. This is why I'm kind of confused as to why people are so surprised that people are booing. I remember what happened last year. I think it was in December 2020 when there was some Millwall fans. They went back to the stadium for a test run for COVID and stuff. And some of the players were booed as they took a knee in support of the Black Lives Matter. And then a couple of weeks later, a banner was revealed when they played away to Queen's Park Rangers. I think it was something to do with kick it out. You know when they have their badge on the sign where it says no room for racism on their armbands now. So why was one anti-racism movement booed and not the other? The reason why is because one stands for things that many people don't believe in, such as the aforementioned things, and that's why the two are inherently linked.
Again, to be honest, Aaron, it's really misguided, and I see the stats. So let's not pretend for a second that people will be behind kick it out or have been behind kick it out. The stats haven't changed when it comes to representation in football for 28 years that we've been in existence. Prior to the Black Lives Matter movement and prior to the whole taking the knee issue, we were seeing massive increases in discrimination and discriminatory behaviour. So again, I'll just return to the point. This is a massive issue. What happened to those 3 England players following the final, we knew was going to happen. That's not about taking the knee. That's because racism is alive and well in British society.
What is it you're referring to there, Tony? When you're saying what happened?
The online abuse. My colleagues and I, watching the game, knew as soon as those 3 black players missed their penalties, the abuse was going to start. We were preparing for it. We know pretty much every high-profile game, when they happen, where the abuse is going to come from. And I'll be absolutely honest with you, I'm a little bit tired of talking about this issue because it's a non-issue. It's a non-issue that takes up too much time. What we should be talking about is racism. It's alive and well. What do we need to do to fix it? And the people who are saying taking the knee shouldn't be this and that and the other have not got the right to choose the gestures that people choose to support anti-discrimination. That's not their right, in the same way that if any group decided to adopt a gesture in support of a movement, whether that's whatever the movement is, who's the people to tell them what gesture they should use in support of to support the cause that they're supporting? It's a nonsense. Let's get back to the point.
But then again, I could then argue. Then if they don't get to decide that, then why should the players get to decide on behalf of the public what they mean by that gesture? Do the players get to decide what taking the knee means objectively? Do they get to decide and say, okay, we believe it means anti-racism, therefore we decide what it means objectively, and if you don't believe me, then you're the real racist? Who are they to decide?
Aaron, the players. I've not heard a single player say that. If I raise my hand now, only I know why I'm raising my hand. If you choose not to believe why I'm raising my hand, that's your problem, not mine. Every single player has said very clearly why they're taking the knee. If you choose to interpret that in a different way, then it's your problem, it's not the players.
And does that go the other way then, Tony? So if someone, for example, boos that gesture, if someone, for example, boos that gesture, the only person that knows why they're booing is that person. And if that person boos and tells you that they're booing not because they're a racist, but, for example, because they don't like, in their mind, the connection between BLM, then by your own logic there, that should be respected as well, shouldn't it?
Look, at the end of the day, people have a right to an opinion. What I'm saying and what I return to is the players have constantly said throughout this campaign They are not taking the knee in support of a political movement. They are taking the knee as a gesture against discrimination. Now, if people choose to disagree, that's one thing. If people choose to boo, that's another thing. But I would return to my earlier point. A lot of the people that are booing, and we see this in every time I can, and there'll be lots of messages, I'm sure, following this. Every time we have a discussion about this, there are a group of people who will not support any initiative when it comes to anti-discrimination. And they'll often couch it in the fact that it's about the gesture, it's about this, that, and the other, when actually it's nothing to do with the gesture. This is about racism. Let's tackle the issue, which is about racism.
But then that presupposes the idea that people who don't support the Black Lives Matter movement are all racist. There are many. I
didn't mention Black Lives Matter. I'm not here to discuss Black Lives Matter, Aaron.
I'm talking about taking the knee.
We're talking about
unfortunately, whether you like it or not.
Hang on, don't talk over each other. We can't hear you.
It's not to do with Black Lives Matter.
Unfortunately, linking Black Lives Matter, then taking the knee, and the movement are inherently linked. There is no getting away with that, whether you like it or not. There's no getting away from that. It's really important that you understand this, because this is why people are booing and will continue to boo. This is the reason why, and it just boggles my mind how you cannot understand that. If it's not for political reasons, then why use a political gesture to support your cause? It makes no sense.
It's not a political gesture. I mean, Aaron, look, I'll just
let's move on from. Let's move on slightly, because otherwise we're going to go around possibly in circles. But Tony, what you're saying is that the issue that we should be looking at is the discrimination, the racism, etc. You're saying that there's a lot of people that would deny essentially racism and discrimination. But I almost feel like it's the opposite way in lots of ways. You know, you mentioned these tweets that the three footballers got, but as I understand it, you know, research that your campaign group did yourselves found that on one of these issues, 70% of these tweets didn't even come from the UK. And any racist gesture or anything that I saw during the Euros, it was immediately jumped on and criticised by the wider population. You know, instantly people were denouncing racist tweets, which by your own research didn't, in the majority, come from this country. Then we saw what happened with the Rashford Memorial, which was immediately called racist. There was anti-racist protests at the site. Everyone immediately came out to denounce racism, and it turned out that it wasn't racist anyway. So what do you say to that?
Again, I'll just refer to the stats first of all. You're talking about.
Well, tell me some stats then, because I don't have those stats. I mean, your stat was that 70% of those tweets didn't come from the UK. Yeah. That's your stat.
And that's up to 70%. But you're also talking about, you know, the social media organisations will openly tell you that millions and millions of messages, aggressive messages, are taken down before they get through. So 70% of a huge number is 30% of a huge number is still a significant number. So we've got a problem, and you only have to talk to any of the professional players that receive direct messages, black players in particular, to know the extent of this problem. And again, I'll be really clear about our stance on this. You know, we knew that those three players were going to get abuse after the match. The social media organisations knew. This isn't the public at large. They're going to
get abused for missing penalties, though. I mean, look at what abuse Beckham got. I'm not professing to be a football fan in any way, shape or form, but people get overexcited and overly passionate when they want their team to win. And when somebody does something that means that they don't win, wrongly, in my view, people get over-aggressive and overly, antagonistic, not because of the skin colour, but because of the act that made that team didn't win.
So then, if it's about the act, they missed a penalty, why do they need to reference the skin colour as part of that conversation or as part of that criticism?
Well, I would say that if they do that, then they are racist, and that is absolutely fundamentally wrong.
And that's exactly what I'm talking about.
I would suggest
things like monkey emojis, things like use of the N-word, this is what we're talking about. We're not talking about just criticism for missing a penalty. And the social media companies knew that was happening, and yet again, they failed those plays because they failed to block it, and they failed to take the stuff down quick enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think Twitter, didn't they declare that just 1,000 tweets had breached their guidelines? I mean, we can talk about whether or not those guidelines are sufficient. They're probably not. But Aaron, what's your view?
Well, it's clear that racism is an issue. It was disgusting to see all those tweets against Saka, my star boy, and Rashford, and I think it was Sancho that missed the penalty as well. But I would say that for every one tweet that was racist towards them, there were probably hundreds of supportive tweets. If you look what happened today, for example, Saka came back to training, and Arsenal released a video on their page, on their Twitter page, about thousands of messages on their training wall in support of Bukayo Saka. So it does show that for every racist out there, there are hundreds and not thousands of people who are coming out to support them. I don't think that we're ever going to 100% totally get rid of racism, because as long as people have free will, people use that free will to make the wrong choice. However, progress is being made. A couple of generations ago, 3 black players missing a penalty. First of all, would there even be 3 black players playing in the first place? But 3 black players missing a penalty, that would be unthinkable. And if they lived in the age of social media in the 70s or 60s, it would be horrendous. But progress has been made. And we are dealing with the issue of racism, and the attitudes have changed towards racism. So I understand that we have work to do, but I would also say that progress is being made. And it's, you know, it's not really fair to say that people should not be against, people should not be, I'm getting my words mixed up, sorry. People should not want to support a movement they don't want to support because they might feel this represents something else and not just racism. This is what people are trying to say. It's not just about racism. So, yeah.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.